Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China's economy is in the global limelight as stimulus packages are being rolled out one after another to boost the market. From raising business confidence to boosting internal demand, from resolving local government debts to issuing ultra-long treasury bonds. What is the latest in a series of moves that are being closely scrutinized and discussed by everyone? What is the rationale behind this stimulus policy? And what lies ahead for China's economy? Join us for our discussion today from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. My special guest today is Li Daokui, Director at Academic Center for Chinese Economic Practice and Thinking of Tsinghua University. Welcome, Professor Li.
You're most welcome.
Well, we know that there are recent, a series of, let's say, press conferences given by Ministry of Finance, and of course, the latest one on Monday, focusing on these small and medium-sized enterprises. Well, the financial ministry really focused on the problem of local government debt. So what's your take of the recent efforts by the central governments?
Well, overall, the recent efforts are very much welcomed by almost everybody in the Chinese economy. There are two batches of policies so far. The first batch was about the stock market, about liquidity, about the financial market. Second batch is about the real economy. Of the second batch, I very much put emphasis upon the Ministry of Finance press conference because to me, the most important, the most urgent, and the most burning issue today in the Chinese economy is in the local governments. Local governments are really squeezed in their liquidity. Local governments, in turn, have been squeezing many enterprises and including some households. So that's causing the whole economy performing below its potential. So that's the overall take, my overall take of the situation.
Well, Minister for Finance said at the press conference that China has sufficient fiscal resilience, and by taking comprehensive measures, it can achieve a balance between revenue and expenditure and meet this year's budgetary goal. What's his message here?
Well, I think this is the most important message among recent economic policies, okay? What do I mean by this? Because to me, the current most important issue is local finance, local public government finance. Local governments are short of cash, okay? And meanwhile, our Minister of Finance said it in a very principled way, in a very accurate way. That is, central government is now full of capacity, full of ammunition in solving this issue. Specifically, what he means is that the central government is very much high in its overall financial capacity. Put it in a more technical way, our central government is holding a lot of assets in the form of many listed, publicly traded companies, including the 6 most profitable commercial banks, 3 mobile phone operators. Meanwhile, the central government is holding, relatively speaking, very little amount of public debt, only 25% of GDP in public debt. The asset level is almost 100% of GDP. The liability, the debt, is only 25%. So the gap is easily 75% of GDP. And that's the room available for the central government to issue debt. Using the newly issued debt, the central government can and should swap out a lot of local government debt. And therefore, the local governments will be able to get a lot of cash. Local governments will be paying a lot of enterprises which were not given proper payment.
Yes, probably because of that. But anyway, I want your response to these, coverage in the Western media in particular. People there are pointing at the lack of more fresh stimulus and further details of the policies, lack of numbers basically. So thereby, there's a kind of like a dismissal of the meeting, of the press conference by the finance ministry. So they say that has left the market disappointed. So what's your views on such voice? Is it a misunderstanding?
Okay, it's a truly misunderstanding. Okay, why is that? Because Western media are used to the operation of governments in the US and in Europe, where the Congress, moves very slowly, where much of the hope is pinned on the administration. Whereas in China, when our Minister of Finance says that the central government will issue more debt, he means that he will have to go to our National People's Congress, the NPC, the legislature, for approval. Meanwhile, in China, this is the most important thing. In China, the legislation and the National People's Congress, they move very fast. Okay? Once they see a clear direction for economic policy adjustment, they move very fast. Unlike the situation in Europe and in the US, they may debate for months, and then in the end, they may come back with nothing. But in the Chinese case, the NPC will move very fast. Our Minister of Finance indicates that he will go to the NPC for approval of a high amount of public debt. Okay, so that's number one message. That's the most important message, I think, to the market. So I think our Western friends in the Western media and also the market so far overall have been underestimating or underrating the Minister of Finance press conference.
Speak of underestimating of the conference of the message probably from the finance ministry. There's a commonly shared projection. It seems to me that in the West, people believe like China needs a fiscal stimulus ranging from 2 trillion yuan to more than 10 trillion yuan. Do you agree with that?
Well, this is a quite little bit complicated issue, nuanced. Let me give you a nuanced answer, okay? So yes, the Chinese economy needs fiscal policy to come in to push for the economy's adjustment. But in principle, yes. In principle, yes, the economy needs the Ministry of Finance to make action. However, I really want to emphasize this time around, the Chinese economy needs a capital account, so to speak, a capital account adjustment. It's not just simply a physical deficit. What I mean by this is the following. What we need today in the Chinese economy is for the local governments to get help, for local governments to be able to sell their assets in the form of highways, in the form of railroads, in the form of airports to the central government. And in exchange, the central government pays cash to local governments. Therefore, local governments will be relieved of a huge burden of short-term debt. Local governments are now being overly burdened by short-term debt, which they are trying to pay in the coming 2 or 3 years, which is impossible, which is undesirable, which is a draconian policy. So what we need, the Chinese economy, is for the central government to issue bond, which can be rolled over. When the old bonds expires, they issue new bond. The central government issue long bond, which can roll back, which can rotate in the future, and then use revenue of the bond to swap out local debt. And in exchange, the central government gets low assets from the local government. So this way, This way, in essence, it's a swap. It's a swap of the liability of the Chinese governments, local and central, from short-term liability to long-term liability to match, in order to match the nature of the assets, because the nature of the assets of local governments is long-term. They hold assets in airports, in railroads, in highways. These assets will generate public revenue, will generate tax revenue 10 years, 20 years down the road when the Chinese economy gets bigger and bigger. These assets cannot generate short-term revenue. So what we need is a huge, is a mega swap of liabilities and assets. Therefore, to relieve local governments and therefore the whole economy of the burden of paying back debt in the short run. So this is not a simple policy of increasing central government and budget deficit. No, that's not the case. The case is a swap.
What about this, special bond for commercial banks, in particular these, state-owned commercial banks, largest one of them. So what is the rationale behind that?
Well, that issue, of course, is a long-term issue. It's important to resolve, but it's not nearly as important as the local debt issue. Let me explain to you what it is, okay? What it is that Chinese commercial banks are doing very well. They have been attracting mounting amount of deposits, okay? So the deposits in Chinese commercial banks, especially in the largest commercial banks, are increasingly easily at the pace of 5%, 10% still in the past few years, okay? So when they attract more and more deposits, okay, as a commercial bank, it has to increase its own assets, right? Its own assets to match the increases in deposit, because the deposit in a commercial bank is regarded as a liability. Okay, in order to match the liability, you have to increase your own capital. That's it, your own capital. But the Chinese commercial banks have been short in their increase of their own capital. Why is that? Because they have been paying dividends to cash dividends to shareholders, so they have not been able to increase their own assets. Now this time around, the Ministry of Finance, as the largest shareholder of Chinese commercial banks, they're injecting capital into Chinese commercial banks. The end result is that Chinese commercial banks are better capitalized. They have more capital. The end result is that in the past two trading sessions, the stock shares, the share price of Chinese commercial banks have been increasing. Okay, so this is a good news. This is a good policy. This is a long-delayed policy, but it's not nearly as important, as urgent as the other policy, which is to issue central debt to swap out local debt.
Moving on to this property market, another challenge for the Chinese economy, of course. The goal is to stabilize the market and reverse its downturn. And we do see, before the National Day holiday, there were policies basically reducing market rate and, of course, lifting off some of the restrictions in terms of the sales of the properties. And then the recent one is that existing mortgage rate of several banks in China will be adjusted to help basically reduce the burden of the investor there. Will these measures help stabilize the property market, or how will them help stabilize the market?
Well, the nature of the problem of the property market is totally different from local debt in the following sense. That is, the property market takes time to come back. The adjustment of the property market is a slow process. Let me give you a metaphor, okay? The problem of local debt is a flu, a cold. When somebody's catching cold or getting a flu or under the weather, it takes 10 days at most 2 weeks to recover. Okay, it's a short-term issue. Whereas the property market is somebody who got a problem with their bones. Okay, so that takes time. Okay, that takes time. It's a slow cooking process. Okay, so today we've seen various policies by the central bank in lowering the mortgage rates. We've seen policies of many local governments in lifting restrictions on housing purchase. We've seen policies of some governments purchasing those empty asset, empty apartments, vacant apartments. All these things are good. All these things will be helpful. All these things will be helping the cooking of the food, okay, or curing the problem. But takes time. Takes time. I would say easily 6 months, 1 year, or even 1.5 years before the property market to fully come back to its normalcy. Okay, so let's be patient.
In the property market, there's a challenge of like liquidity problem, that what you call it, because there's a lack of cash for the developers. Is that problem still severe, or is it being dealt with?
The issue is, I'm just repeating your question. The issue is that many developers, especially the largest developers, are running out of cash. They used to be able to move or swap their assets across region, okay, because the nature of Chinese developers is that they set up independent companies in each region. Okay, every piece of property is a company. It's an independent company of the developer. They used to be able to swap liquidity, the swap cash across nationwide, but today they cannot, because each local government is worried about this developer may not be able to finish the project. So each local government is holding on to the cash of the local developer's company. So that's the liquidity problem. So in principle, okay, I'm saying, just to simplify, okay, the liquidity problem is basically resolved by today. 1 year ago, last August, 1 year from last August, the August 2023 was the most urgent, was the most dangerous, most perilous situation. Okay, at that situation, lots of developers were defaulting on their overseas bond, creating a situation of downward adjustment of Chinese sovereign debt, creating a problem of currency depreciation. But today, that liquidity problem is in principle very much mitigated. However, as a policy thinker, I still propose that more liquidity should be injected into the system of developers in order for developers to be able to finish their projects, in order for developers not to default on their assets. Okay, let the adjustment of developers be done gradually. Don't push them into default at once.
On the boosting of business confidence, the government has recently published the draft of a private economy promotion law. So this is draft version. It's now made public to seek the solicit opinions from the public. So how do you look at the law, and what do you think need to be written into the law to basically, to play an expected role of boosting the confidence?
Well, to me, the proposed legislation, okay, is a good gesture. It's a good move. It's a good move. However, I would not pin much hope upon that new legislation in order for the economy to recover quickly. Okay, in other words, we cannot count on this new legislation for a speedy recovery of the economy. The problem of Chinese private enterprises not being treated properly is long-term issue. It's a long-term issue. That issue can only be resolved gradually, okay? Can only be resolved with overall legal and policy environment. There should be a comprehensive and long-term reform measures to be put in place in order for Chinese private companies to feel better, to have more confidence. It's a slow cooking process. We have to treat this as a beginning of start of a long process.
What about consumption, the confidence of consumption? We talk about the business confidence, confidence to consume. There's obviously like luster performance there. What more can we do? Is that a long-term issue or short-term issue?
That's a short-term issue. That's a short-term issue. There a lot of policies can be implemented to see immediate impact. Again, as a policy thinker and somebody who has been working hard to make policy suggestions to our policy makers, I have been proposing for a very simple policy. Let me put it again here, okay? That is the policy for the central government to issue as much as 1 trillion RMB amount of tax expenditure, okay? To put out the expenditure for whom? For consumers, okay? For example, during the coming November 11, okay, which is a big consumption holiday for Chinese consumers, right? Let the central government tell consumers that if consumers spend 100 RMB in buying things, the central government would give you 10 RMB as a subsidy. Okay, let me give you 10% subsidy, okay? So long as you spend 100 RMB, okay? So this simple policy will have an immediate impact of pushing consumption. And then when consumption goes up, usually it goes by four times. So 1 yuan, 1 RMB of government subsidy will come out, will generate 4 yuan of final consumption. When the final consumption goes up to 4 yuan, the central government will be able to collect more tax because central government collect tax mostly from the turnover, most of the sales of goods. In the end, the central government pays nothing. Why? Because in the end, it collects more tax from the increased consumption. So I've been proposing this policy again. So I am still not giving up. I still believe this will work. And this will definitely help the current economic situation.
The stock market, we have seen this up and down, roller coaster ride. So how do you see this performance and what's the expectation?
Well, overall, the Chinese stock markets have been doing very well during the past 7 or 8 trading sessions, starting September 24th. That's the day when the central bank issued a batch of policy. Overall, there has been about 20 to 25% increase. Overall, so far so good, okay? And I think me as a policy thinker, I have been very encouraged by this good performance of the stock market. Okay, this is the reason for the good performance of the stock market is that people realized that the central government is now putting together actions, putting together a package of policies to deal with the current problem, okay? That's the most important thing. Although actual policies are not forthcoming yet, they will be coming very soon, okay? So far, I think our shareholders, our stock market investors are very savvy, very rational, very smart. They have been reading the situation, I think, overall correctly.
Well, let's take a look at, again, the stimulus. Some worry the recent stimulus moves may come with, some side effects. Do you agree with this kind of projection?
Yes, all forms of stimulus will have side effects. But remember, if the economy is not being helped, if stimulus policies are not in place, then the current situation will result in even worse, much worse consequences in the long run. Okay, so let me again give you a metaphor. Okay, so suppose I have caught a cold. Okay, I am under the weather. I am getting a flu. Okay. If I don't take care of myself, if I don't go get enough sleep, drink enough water, if I don't take medicine to mitigate my symptom, then I may I may face a situation in which the short-term coldness, the short-term flu may run into a long-term problem with my lung, with my heart. In the long run, I may suffer from my heart problem, my lung problem. So it is very important to cure the short-term problem. Otherwise, the short-term problem will aggravate into long-term issues. This is the biggest worry I have for the Chinese economy. Fortunately, the policymakers now have realized this problem. They are putting together their actions that we discussed at the beginning of this interview.
Well, Professor Li, this NDRC chairman of the planning agency of the Chinese economy, Zheng Shanjie said at the press conference that the operation of the Chinese economy is stable, and China, he's confident of reaching the goal of around 5% economic growth of 2024. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I fully agree with the view that 5% this year is no problem. 5% this year, no problem as a target. The issue is next year and the year after, okay? The current situation, which mainly comes from local debt, if it's not resolved, then next year will be the issue. The year after will be a bigger issue, okay? So in the short run, I'm not so worried. I worry about the consequences of current problems not being resolved, and then next year and the year after, we will see bigger and worse problems.
Thank you, Professor Li. Thank you for speaking with us.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome.